morning, students. Today I will discuss something on the basic anatomy of the osteology. During examination, particularly in viva examination, the examiner will ask you to pick up any bone of your own choice, or the examiner may give you any particular bone. So whatever may be, you have to first identify the bone and then to hold it in anatomical position. If you cannot hold the bone anatomical position, after that the examiner may not ask you any question. They may give you 0 out of that, because this is the very basic thing and very important thing to hold the bone and to determine the site of this particular bone, so that the examiner may ask you the following questions. So let's start with the bones of the upper extremity one by one. And I think all of you can recognize this bone. This is clavicle, all of you know. So two bones are there. The examiner asks you hold the right sided clavicle or hold the left sided clavicle, or if any one bone is there, pick up this bone. So you picked up this bone. Picked up means you have to hold the bone in anatomical position. How to hold? To hold in anatomical position, in case of any bones, you have to determine whether this bone belongs to right side or left side, and its anterior side, posterior side, lateral side, medial side, or upper end, or upper side and lower sides. So all these 6 dimensions you have to keep in mind. Let's see, this is clavicle. So you can see there are 2 ends. Of these 2 ends, one is rounded, one is flat. So from your anatomical knowledge, you must know the rounded one is the medial end or sternal end facing towards sternum, and flattened end, it is facing towards the scapula. This is the scapula, this is the acromial process. So this end should be acromial end. So acromial ends will be flattened and sternal end will be rounded. So now you know the medial and lateral part. If I hold this, again medial and lateral part, but which one is correct, this one or this one? To determine this, you have to know which one is anterior side and which one is posterior side. Now see, this curvature is there. This curvature, it is convex or concave on the anterior side from medial to lateral, and in this convex or concave, this 2/3 on the medial side is convex and lateral side is concave. So in a clavicle, anteriorly medial 2/3 will be convex and lateral 1/3 will be concave. If I hold this bone in this way, now see, this become concave, medial 2/3, but the right one or correct one is this: medial 2/3 will be convex, lateral 1/3 will be concave. So this is anterior side, this is posterior side. Now you have to know which one is upper surface and which one is lower surface. The upper surface, you can see upper surface is more or less smooth, but the lower surface on the lateral side or in the middle side, middle part, this is a grooved structure is there. There is a groove, and here the rough part is there. The rough part for the attachment one ligament, and the groove for the attachment one muscle. That muscle is subclavian muscle. So the groove is called subclavian groove. This subclavian groove, sub means below. So below the clavicle is the subclavian groove. So subclavian groove will be on the inferior surface. So now you know which one is superior surface, which is more or less smooth, and the groove and the rough part is on the inferior surface. So this is the inferior surface. So now you know which one is medial, which one is lateral, which one is anterior, which one is posterior, which one is upper and which one is lower. So this bone belongs to right side. So you have to hold this bone by your right hand, and hold, how to hold? Just like this. You have to hold the bone in such a way so that the medial end, it looks forwards and medially and to some extent downwards. Upper end or the lateral end or the acromial end, it is backwards and laterally and to some extent upwards in comparison to the anterior end. So like this, in a pen-holding fashion, you have to hold the clavicle in this way. So you tell that this is the clavicle of right side. And on the other hand, this clavicle, if you see, this clavicle, this is rounded end medial, flattened end lateral, anterior side medially convex to concave, medial 2/3, lateral 1/3, and inferiorly there is a groove, subclavian groove. This is the subclavian grooved part for subclavius muscle, and upper part smooth. So this is the clavicle of left side. So you have to hold the bone in such a way so that the sternal length looks forwards medially and the acromial end backwards and laterally. Anterior end or medial end to some extent downwards and this end upwards. So the obliquely placed. So you have to hold the bone in this way. So both the clavicle, if you hold by your both hand, it looks like this. And in between these two end of the clavicle, there's two ends, medial end of the clavicle, there is the manubrium sternum. So that will form the sternoclavicular joint, like this. So in between is the manubrium sterni. This is the anatomical position of both right clavicle and left clavicle. Then the examiner will ask you other questions like presenting parts, then attachment, etc., including ossification may be asked at the end. So you know there are two bones of pectoral girdle. One is clavicle and second one is scapula. I already discussed how to hold the clavicle in anatomical position. So next to clavicle, another bone of pectoral girdle is scapula. So two scapula are there, you know. So you have to hold this scapula in anatomical position. Before holding, you have to keep in mind some anatomical features of this bone. That means which one is anterior side, which one is posterior side, which one lateral, which one medial, which one upper and which one lower. Then you can hold the bone in anatomical position and which side this bone belongs to. The anatomical features you have to keep in mind. One of them is a glenoid cavity or glenoid, which is this glenoid fossa. This fossa should face laterally because this fossa will form shoulder joint with the humeral head. So it should face laterally. So that should be lateral. Upper and lower, the lower end it is triangular tapering end or inferior angle, it is the lower end. So that should be upper. So now I know this is upper side, this is lower side, this is lateral side, this is medial side. Then anterior posterior, how to recognize the anterior and posterior? Anteriorly, this surface should be concave to some extent and some ridges are there. The ridges for the intermuscular septum attachment. So there are ridges and in between the ridges there are grooves and it is concave as a whole. You see this bone? Concave as a whole. And posteriorly, this part is called the spine or spinous process of the scapula. Spine, posteriorly. So now I know which one is anterior. This groove surface is anterior and spine is posterior, glenoid cavity is lateral and the tapering end is inferior. So I have to hold the bone, the scapula in such a way so that the anterior surface looks forwards and downwards and to some extent medially, this side. And this glenoid cavity should face upwards, laterally and to some extent anteriorly, like this. And inferior end or inferior angle downwards, spine posterior. So this is a anatomical position. It is not like this or not like this, to some extent like the obliquely, so that it forms an angle with this vertical plane or sagittal plane of about 45 degree. So it should be obliquely placed like this. The plane of scapula is like this, not like this or like this. Obliquely placed plane of the scapula. So this is the anatomical position of scapula of left side. And this is the anatomical position of scapula of right side. You see, upwards, forwards and laterally, spine posteriorly and concave, this surface, a subscapular surface facing anteriorly and downwards like this. So this is the anatomical position of scapula of right side and this is the anatomical position of scapula of left side like this. Left scapula and right scapula. Then the examiner will ask you the other features of the scapula, what are the surface, what are the borders, what are the process, then some important attachments, etc. That will be asked after you have hold the bone in correct way, not before that. So this is scapula. Next bone of the upper extremity, very important bone, this is humerus. It is the longest bone of the upper extremity. There are, two humerus are there, one right, one left. I have to hold any bone in anatomical position. If this bone is given to you to hold it in anatomical position, then what are the features you will search for? Which one is upper and which one is lower? Upper end is a rounded end, there is a head is there, and lower end is a flat end. So this is upper and this is lower. Then anterior, posterior and lateral, medial, you have to identify. Anteriorly, there should be a groove in the upper end. That groove is called intertubercular groove or intertubercular sulcus. There are two tubercles are there, greater tubercle and lesser tubercle, and in between these two tubercle is the intertubercular groove or sulcus. That should face anteriorly. And if you see the lower end, in the lower end there are three fossa, two anteriorly, one posteriorly. The posterior fossa is grouped, a larger one, that is called Olecranon fossa, and anteriorly there are two fossa, one for the radius, one for the ulna. So one is radial fossa and one is coronate fossa. I will show you the ulna later on and radius later on. Then you will see how this process or the radial head is coming close to this fossa. So anteriorly two fossa, posteriorly one fossa. So this should be the lower end. So now you know the upper end and lower end. Upper end rounded head, lower end flat end, anterior, posterior, anteriorly this groove is there, like this. So automatically this surface will be posterior, where you can find a oblique groove is there called the radial groove. Now lateral, medial. How to identify the lateral side and medial side? The lower end, this is called trochlea. This is trochlea and this part is the capitulum. Capitulum will be on the lateral side and trochlea will be on the medial side, because this trochlea will articulate with the ulna, which is the bone of the medial side of the forearm, and this one capitulum will articulate with the head of the radius. The radius is a bone of the lateral side of the forearm. So this capitulum on the lateral side and this trochlea on the medial side. So you know which one lateral, which one medial, which one upper, which one lower, which one anterior, which one posterior. Now we have to hold the bone in anatomical position. How to hold? See, this is the bone of left side, because the head will face upwards to articulate with the scapula, like this. So that head should face upwards, backwards and to some extent medially. Upward, backwards and medially, lower end downwards, groove should face anteriorly. So this is the anatomical position of humerus of left side, and this is the humerus of right side. So this is the anatomical position. Next bone of the upper limb is the radius and ulna. To ulna and to radius. So first of all, try to hold the radius in anatomical position. You know there are two bones in the forearm. Radius is laterally and ulna is medially placed. So this is lateral bone and this is medial bone. So lateral bone, radius, this small disc-shaped upper end is called the head of the radius. This one, disc-shaped, this head, then neck, then tuberosity. The different anatomical features are there. But I have to hold the bone anatomically first. So upper end should be the small one and disc-shaped head, and lower end it is flattened and broad. So upper and lower is known by this. Then lateral, medial, laterally there should be a process which is projecting downwards from the lower end called styloid process. That styloid process should be on the lateral side, not medial side, lateral side. And anterior, posterior, how to identify? So on the lower end, on the posterior side, there is a prominent ridge called dorsal tubercle or Lister's tubercle. So this Lister tubercle facing posteriorly. Styloid process downwards and laterally. apparent disc-shaped head upwards. And moreover, on the medial side of the radial head, there should be a smooth surface to articulate with the radial notch of ulna. This one, radial notch of ulna to articulate with the head of the radius. So there should be a smooth articular surface on the medial side of the radial head. So by all these features, now you know which one is upper side, which one is lower side, upper disc-shaped, lower flattened, medial and lateral. Medially on the upper end there is a facet for the ulna, and the lower end laterally the lateral styloid process. Anterior and posterior known by posteriorly there is a ridge or a tubercle on the lower end of the radius called Lister's tubercle or dorsal tubercle. So this is posterior side. Now you can hold the bone in anatomical position. This is the radius of left side, and on the other hand this is the radius of the right side. Upper end shaft, lower end dorsal tubercle, styloid process, and here is the smooth articular surface for the ulna. So this is the anatomical position of radius of right side, anatomical position of radius of left side. This one, right and left radius. Next bone of the forearm is the ulna, the two ulna. In the ulna, there are again upper end and shaft and lower end. There are three important parts. How to identify the upper end and lower end? Upper end, it is broad, and so many processes are there. One process, another process, and in between two processes there is a notch. This process is the Olecranon process. This is coronate process, and this notch is the trochlear notch. So this notch will face forward, trochlear notch, and this trochlear notch will articulate with the humerus like this, like this. So this is the trochlear part of the lower end of humerus. So this is trochlear notch. So this fossa of the humerus for this process, coronate process, and posteriorly this fossa for the Olecranon process. So it is called Olecranon fossa, this one. You know that part. Now you look at this ulna. So this is Olecranon process, coronate process, and trochlear notch. All these parts will be on the upper end, and the lower end, or called head of the ulna, very small part, and from the head medially and posteriorly there is a small projection of bone, this one, that is called styloid process of ulna. This process facing downwards and posteromedial to the head of the ulna. So upper end, lower end, it is known by you, and on the lateral side there is a sharp ridge, sharp border called the interosseous border, like this one, and at the upper end there is this notch or articular surface which will articulate with the head of the radius. So this articular surface of ulna will face laterally. So lateral, this is medial, this is upper, this is lower, this is anterior, trochlear notch anterior, ulnar tuberosity anterior. So this is posterior, automatically posterior border is rounded. So by all these features, upper end is known by this process and notch, lower end is known by the head and styloid process, medial side is known by this articular surface and the sharp interosseous border, this one, and anteriorly this notch, this one trochlear notch. So posteriorly this rounded posterior border. So this is the ulna of left side, and this is the radius of left side. These are two bones of left side like this, and by the same features this is the ulna of right side, like this, trochlear notch. This is Olecranon process, this is coronate process, and this is the site for the articulation of the radius on the lateral side, this styloid process. So this is the ulna of right side, ulna of left side, and ulna of right side, side by side. I think it is clear how to hold the ulna in anatomical position. And next bones of the upper limb, the bones of the hand, and bones of the hands are again classified into carpal bones, then metacarpal bones, and the phalanges. There are 8 carpal bones. They are named as capitate, hamate, triquetral, lunate, scaphoid, trapezium, trapezoid, and pisiform. There are 8 carpal bones, and then 5 metacarpal bones, and there are 14 phalanges. Of this, in the for 4 digits, this is medial 4 digits. There are 3 phalanges and 2 phalanges for the thumb. So that's all for the bones of the upper extremity, how to hold the different bones in anatomical position. Next video, I will show you how to hold the bones of inferior extremity in separate video. So thank you very much for today.